Catastrophist, myth-based scientific theory developed by Talbot and myself is primarily a historical reconstruction. Simply put, it is our attempt to reconstruct the true history of the Earth and the solar system. If a historical reconstruction is to be given serious consideration, it must be expected that it will resolve numerous problems previously considered elusive or intractable. A false historical reconstruction, on the other hand, will never truly resolve any outstanding anomalies, and its flaws will soon be exposed. The Eye of Horus stands out as perhaps the single most important symbol in all of ancient Egyptian mythology. At the same time, the eye remains enigmatic, and leading Egyptologists readily confess their inability to make sense of the manifold traditions surrounding it. One thing is certain: the mythology attached to the eye is catastrophic from start to finish. Already in the pyramid text, the eye is described as a terrifying astral power whose rampage at the dawn of time threatened to destroy mankind and throw the cosmos into confusion. If ever there was a test case for the theoretical power of a comparative approach to ancient myth, this is it. How on earth is it possible to make sense of the bizarre traditions attached to the Eye of Horus? In order to understand the symbolism attached to the Eye of Horus, it is essential at the outset of our investigation to come to grips with the Egyptian traditions telling of its incendiary rampage at the time of beginnings that purportedly brought the world to the very brink of extinction. This episode is most familiar, perhaps, from a text known as The Destruction of Mankind, inscribed on tomb walls of various kings from the 19th dynasty, and as such, one of the oldest mythological narratives to survive from ancient Egypt. There we read that the Eye, as the goddess Hathor, was dispatched by Re to punish mankind who had apparently rebelled against his rule. Quote, "Then mankind plotted something in the very presence of Re. Then Re's advisors said in the presence of his majesty, 'May thy eye be sent, that it may catch for thee them who scheme with evil things. It should go down as Hathor.' So then this goddess came and slew mankind in the desert." End of quote. The destructive campaign waged against mankind was commonly mythologized as a bloodbath wrought by the warrior goddess Hathor or her alter ego Sekhmet. Indeed, in that same text we read, quote, "Hathor will wade in the blood of mankind as Sekhmet." End of quote. Although the destruction of mankind dates to the New Kingdom, the myth of the raging eye goddess is attested already in the Pyramid of Unas, circa 2350 BC, and hence was of untold antiquity. In Unas's pyramid, we read that the flame from Horus's eye produced a prodigious storm shaking the very foundations of heaven. Quote, "I, Horus, will put flame in my eye, and it will encompass you and set storm among the doers of evil deeds, and its fiery outburst among the primeval ones. I will smite away the arms of Shu which support the sky." End of quote. So too the coffin texts are replete with cryptic allusions to the apocalyptic disaster associated with the Eye of Horus. Spell 316 emphasizes the terrifying power of the raging goddess. Quote, "I am the fiery eye of Horus, which went forth terrible, lady of slaughter. What Re said about her, 'Mighty is the fear of you, great is the awe of you, mighty is your striking power. All men have been in the sleep of death because of you and through your power.'" End of quote. The Eye of Horus is here likened to a heaven-spanning flame. Indeed, the celestial context of the warring eye goddess is everywhere apparent. Quote, "I am a fire in sky and earth, and all my foes are under my flame." End of quote. At one time or another, every major Egyptian goddess is identified with the Eye of Horus: Hathor, Isis, Wadjet, Mut, Wepset, etc. The traditions attached to Sekhmet aptly illustrate the fundamental nature of the warring goddess. In the Bremner Rhine papyrus, it is Sekhmet who protects the king and wards off his enemy as the raging eye. Quote, "Thou art condemned to this fire of the eye of Re. It sends forth its fiery blast against thee. It has power over thee in its name of Sekhmet. It is fiery against thee in this its name of glorious serpent. End of quote. The image of Sekhmet as a raging serpentine goddess is abundantly attested in the religious inscriptions discovered at Edfu, where the eye goddess is once again compared to a flame-spewing serpent celebrated for her protective powers. Witness the following passage. Quote, O Sekhmet, eye of Re, great of flame, lady of protection who envelops her creator, O Sekhmet who fills the ways with blood, who slaughters to the limits of all she sees, come towards the living image, the living hawk, protect him and preserve him from all evil. End of quote. Remarkably, the terrifying goddess who fills the ways with blood and slaughters to the limits is here urged to approach Horus, the living hawk and star god, and serve as his protector. Horus's protection by the fire-spitting Uraeus serpent is axiomatic in Egyptian religion. Numerous texts allude to the pacification of the raging eye. Although the precise means of the pacification are never spelled out as explicitly as we might wish, it seems clear that upon being calmed, the eye was returned or otherwise restored to the god Horus. Indeed, a wealth of evidence suggests that the eye goddess eventually came to adorn the Horus star as his royal headband or crown. An exemplary text in this regard is Utterance 220-221 from the Pyramid text, wherein the eye goddess is addressed by her epithet, Great of Magic. Quote, He has come to you, O Great of Magic, for he is Horus encircled with the protection of his eye, O Great of Magic. Ho, fiery serpent, grant that the dread of me be like the dread of you. Grant that the fear of me be like the fear of you. If Ikat the Great has borne you, Ikat the serpent has adorned you. If Ikat the serpent has borne you, Ikat the Great has adorned you, because you are Horus encircled with the protection of his eye. End of quote. As stated here in no uncertain terms, it is the encircling of Horus by the fire-spewing Uraeus goddess, addressed as Ikat the serpent, Great of Magic, and other archaic epithets, which endows the star god with his eye and thereby provides him with a magical rampart of protection. Essential to understanding the symbolism involved is the report that the raging eye is calmed upon returning to and encircling the Horus star as a crown. The return of the raging eye Uraeus to its rightful place atop the brow of the Horus star, in addition to providing the royal crown, endows the latter with awe-inspiring glory and power. Indeed, it is no exaggeration to say that the eye goddess invests the Horus star as the king of the gods through this act of encirclement or conjunction. Susan Johnson summarized the primeval mythological events in question as follows. Quote, The god of creation appeased the eye, which had become a cobra, by placing it on his forehead as the Uraeus who guards the crown. The pacification of the cobra thus marked the establishment of monarchy, and the Uraeus became the protective symbol of legitimate kingship and unity. End of quote. Johnson's conclusion is right on the money and bears underscoring. It is the joining together or reunion of the eye Uraeus with the Horus star which marks the establishment of kingship. The pacification of the raging eye, moreover, signals the restoration of world order after the terrifying cosmic upheaval attending its destructive rampage. Even from this brief survey, it is evident that the Eye of Horus plays a central role in ancient Egyptian conceptions regarding kingship and divinity. How then are we to explain the peculiar mythological traditions attached to the raging eye goddess? James Allen, the much-esteemed translator of the Pyramid text, would identify the Eye of Horus with the sun. Quote, The Uraeus goddess is essentially the destructive power of the sun. She is a goddess because the sun is viewed in this case as the eye of the sun god, Horus or Re, which is feminine. She is normally represented as a cobra because of the notion of a power that can strike and kill. The hieroglyphic representation of this is N6. The same power is viewed as inherent in the king's headgear, which is why it also has a Uraeus. End of quote. Yet if the Eye of Horus is to be identified with the sun, how are we to understand its departure from Horus Ra? For if Horus is to be identified with the sun, As Allen assures us, one is left with the seemingly paradoxical situation wherein the sun I departs and after threatening the world with destruction returns to encircle or crown itself. It must also be asked why Egyptian skywatchers would conceptualize one and the same celestial body as simultaneously both male and female, insofar as the Horus star represented the celestial prototype of the masculine war god, while the eye represented the archetypal mother goddess. This interpretation of the Egyptian myth would appear to be at odds with the facts and more than a little strained. Equally problematic is the fact that the explicit catastrophic imagery attending the raging of the fire-spewing eye is difficult to explain by the solar hypothesis. In what sense is the sun displaced from heaven while presenting a terrifying fire-spewing serpentine form? Under what circumstances does the sun threaten to destroy mankind? What is there about the sun's familiar appearance that would lead it to be conceptualized as a serpentine goddess encircling the Horus star as a luminous crown or headband? Far from being a reference to one and the same star, Horus's relationship to the eye is best understood as reflecting a close interaction or conjunction between two entirely different celestial bodies. On this matter, the preponderance of evidence is clear. The eye of Horus is to be identified with the mother goddess, and as such, it represents an entirely different star from that associated with the masculine Horus, identifiable with Mars in our historical reconstruction. In ancient Egypt and around the globe, only one star fits the bill as a celestial prototype for the mother goddess, namely Venus. In this conclusion, we find ourselves in complete agreement with Ralph Krauss, who in a number of publications investigating Egyptian astral religion presented evidence that the eye of Horus is to be identified with the planet Venus. Granted the possibility that Venus is a subject of the Egyptian traditions regarding the eye of Horus, how are we to understand the cataclysmic imagery attending its destructive rampage? Whence derives the eye's pronounced capacity for raining fire and destruction on mankind? Why would the planet Venus be conceptualized as a raging serpent at one moment and as pacified or calmed on the other? On these all-important questions, Krauss had nothing substantive to offer, noting simply, quote, "It remains unclear how the observer understood raging and peacefulness," end of quote. The comparative method is all-important here, for as strange and far-fetched as the Egyptian traditions attached to the eye appear, striking parallels exist in Mesopotamia and elsewhere which describe the planet Venus in analogous terms, as a terrifying agent of sky-borne disaster, one prone to assuming a fire-spewing serpentine form. It was in the latter guise, according to the archaic traditions preserved in the Sumerian text known as the Exaltation of Inanna, that the warmongering planet goddess rained fire from heaven. Quote, "Like a dragon you have deposited venom on the land. When you roar at the earth like thunder, no vegetation can stand up to you. A flood descending from its mountain, O foremost one, you are Inanna of heaven and earth, raining the fanned fire down upon the nation." End of quote. Virtually identical imagery is to be found in early literary traditions of the Semitic goddess Ishtar, who, like the Sumerian Inanna, was explicitly identified with the planet Venus. The following passage is representative in this regard. Quote, "I rain battle down like flames in the fighting. I make heaven and earth shake with my cries. I constantly traverse heaven, then I trample the earth. I destroy what remains of the inhabited world." End of quote. Here, as in the Sumerian hymns describing Inanna, it is the planet Venus that is raining fire and destruction from the sky. The celestial context of the imagery in question could hardly be more self-evident or unequivocal. In ancient Mesopotamia, as in Egypt, the raging planet goddess brings an apocalyptic storm in its wake. The testimony of a Sumerian text known as BM 23:820 is instructive in this regard. Quote, "Inanna, who pours down rain over all the lands, over all the people, loud thundering storm. Goddess who makes heavens tremble, who makes the earth quake, you who pour down firebrands over the earthly orb, who flash like lightning over the highlands. Your angry heart is a terrifying flood wave. End of quote. In this hymn, as in various other early Sumerian texts, Inanna Venus rains down fire and flood from the skies, much as was reported of the raging eye in Egyptian texts dating from the same general period, roughly 2000 BC. The cataclysmic nature of the goddess's rampage is evident. Quote, wherever she spits venom, there is storm, and strife makes the ground groan. End of quote. Even from this cursory survey, the striking parallels between the mythological traditions describing Inanna Venus and those attached to the Eye of Horus are readily apparent. Yet in the dozens of monographs devoted to the Egyptian eye goddess, not to mention the hundreds of articles that have addressed the peculiar symbolism surrounding the raging Eye of Horus, I am unaware of a single scholar who has even commented on the manifold correspondences between the eye and Inanna Venus, much less offered a systematic cross-cultural analysis of the traditions. Suffice it to say that knowledge of comparative mythology is not commonplace in Egyptological circles. As a result, modern Egyptology remains mired in the same outdated solar interpretations that dominated scholarship at the turn of the 20th century, wholly oblivious to the fact that ancient Egyptian descriptions of the raging Eye of Horus share a virtual one-to-one correspondence with Sumerian accounts of the raging Inanna Venus. To return to the Egyptian testimony, it will be remembered that the raging eye produced an all-encompassing storm. In the following account from Unis's pyramid, quoted earlier, the flame from Horus's eye is likened to a raging storm. Quote, I will put flame in my eye, and it will encompass you and set storm among the doers of evil deeds, and its fiery outburst among the primeval ones. I will smite away the arms of Shu which support the sky. As for how we are to understand the storm in question, it is evident that it is a meteorological disturbance of cosmic proportions. In the coffin text, the same word neshin is repeatedly used to denote an apocalyptic disturbance. Yet in spell 335 from the coffin text, the same word is employed to describe the wrath of the raging goddess. Quote, I raise the hair from the sacred eye at the time of its wrath. End of quote. The seemingly incongruous reference to hair in conjunction with the stellar eye is addressed, if not fully clarified, by a gloss appended to the spell in question. Quote, what is the sacred eye at the time of its wrath? Who raised the hair from it? It is the right eye of Re when it was wroth with him after he had sent it on an errand. End of quote. Here the disaster-bringing wrath of the raging eye is explicitly linked to its hair. Taking these two traditions together, it seems evident that the wrath or storm associated with the Eye of Horus was somehow connected to its extraterrestrial hair. The same conclusion is supported by the apparent etymological relationship between the Egyptian words shen, hair, and shent, storm, the latter term being employed to denote the primeval storm that accompanied the deceased king's ascension to heaven. Also relevant here is the word shent, denoting the eye goddess's wrath. Here then is the probable answer to the question which so baffled Krauss regarding the Egyptian traditions describing the Eye of Horus as a planet Venus, namely, how to explain its peculiar propensity for raging. The eye was conceptualized as raging because it displayed disheveled hair while circling about the sky, this while raising a storm and spewing forth immense volumes of fiery material. Thus it is that in some accounts of the return of the wandering goddess, she shakes her disheveled hair. The adjective employed here is thth, denoting disheveled, yet the same word also describes a cataclysmic meteorological event in illo tempore. If this much is fairly obvious and straightforward, it remains to be shown how or why the planet Venus could ever be conceptualized as suddenly displaying disheveled or storm-laden hair. The answer to this question, it must be said, will not sit well with the central dogma of modern astronomy, which holds that the visible planets have not changed their appearance or orbits in any fundamental manner for many millions of years. Yet it is necessary to follow the evidence wherever it happens to lead. As Sherlock Holmes was wont to say, quote, When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. End of quote. As improbable as it must appear at first sight, the testimony of ancient sky watchers with regards to Venus's recent history tells a very consistent story, namely that of a planet run amok while displaying comet-like hair. In order to clarify the nature of Venus's hair from the standpoint of natural science, it is instructive to revisit the Egyptian traditions recounting how the eye goddess came to encircle the Horus star with a royal headband. Utterance 510 from the Pyramid Text is especially informative in this regard. There the eye is addressed as Ikot the Great. Quote, I am this headband of red color which went forth from Ikot the Great. I am this eye of Horus which is stronger than men and mightier than the gods. End of quote. Here the all-powerful eye of Horus is specifically identified with a headband emanating from the Ikot serpent. The word translated as headband here is seshed, determined with the following glyph. If the eye of Horus is to be identified with the celestial body, as all Egyptologists agree, how are we to explain this choice of determinative? This question is directly related to another. Why would a headband be likened to or identified with a terrifying serpentine form which rains fire and is stronger than men and mightier than the gods? A decisive clue is provided by the fact that, in addition to denoting headband, the word seshed also signifies a comet-like object or flame-scattering star. Indeed, there are a number of Egyptian texts which describe a seshed star streaking across the sky and scattering fire. In the so-called poetical stela found at Karnak, for example, the warring pharaoh Thutmose III is likened to a seshed star strewing its fire in flame and yielding its downpour. As Wainwright pointed out in his discussion of the royal inscription in question, the terrifying specter of the seshed star is a decided point of emphasis in the Egyptian text. Quote, its dangerous nature is certified by the desire of the pharaoh to seem to his enemies in battle to be like the seshed. End of quote. Hitherto overlooked, however, is the fact that the seshed star's propensity for strewing flames of fire and inspiring dread is precisely mirrored in Egyptian reports of the raging eye of Horus. The passage from Unis's pyramid, quoted earlier, wherein the flame from Horus's eye is likened to a raging storm, quote, I will put flame in my eye, and it will encompass you and set storm among the doers of evil deeds and its fiery outburst among these primeval ones. End of quote. The eye of Horus is here said to unleash a fiery outburst or swell of efflux on the primeval ones. This tradition recalls the fact that a downpour of fiery efflux was associated with the seshed star on Thutmose's poetical stela. How then are we to explain the eye's peculiar association with the flood of fire? That there was a celestial basis for such imagery is strongly supported by the fact that an extraterrestrial flooding and raining of fire is the very disaster dispensed by Inanna Venus, as evidenced not only by the Sumerian story quoted above, but also by the following hymn as well. Quote, like a dragon you have deposited venom on the land. A flood descending from its mountain, O foremost one, you are Inanna of heaven and earth, raining the fanned fire down upon the nation. End of quote. The fiery flood associated with the raging eye of Horus, in turn, finds a precise structural analog in the wrath-like flood associated with the incendiary rampage of Inanna Venus. Witness the following passage. Quote, her wrath is a devastating flood which no one can withstand. End of quote. In light of the detailed parallels between Egyptian traditions describing the Eye of Horus and Sumerian traditions celebrating Inanna Venus, it is necessary to ask whether the respective accounts are describing the same celestial body. On this point, the evidence is unambiguous. The Eye of Horus, like Inanna, is to be identified with the planet Venus. This finding, in turn, has profound and wide-ranging ramifications for the proper understanding of ancient Egyptian religion, insofar as the eye's history is catastrophic from start to finish, being explicitly associated with an apocalyptic cosmic disaster in Ilo Tempore. After an indefinite period of time during which it was conceptualized as waging war against mankind amidst darkness and chaos, the raging eye was eventually pacified or calmed, whereupon order was restored to the cosmos. According to the archaic account preserved in utterances 220 and 221 from the Pyramid text, the eye eventually came to encircle the star god Horus as a serpentine goddess, Ikot the serpent, thereby providing him with an aegis-like headband or crown. The eye goddess's encircling of the Horus star, in our view, has direct reference to extraordinary astronomical events in which the planet Venus appeared to conjoin with Mars and encircle it with a comet-like band. Hence the reason why this one word Seshed denotes at once Ikot's headband as well as a flame-scattering star. Indeed, the mere fact that the word Seshed is elsewhere determined by the following glyph confirms its intimate relationship with the Uraeus serpent which came to form the encircling crown of Horus. Granted that the Egyptian eye and Sumerian Inanna trace to a common celestial prototype, it follows that one must expect to find analogous traditions pointing to an intimate relationship between Inanna Venus and the royal headband in Sumerian lore. The name Inanna was written with an archaic pictograph known as the Mush sign, which Peter Huber, a noted authority on ancient Near Eastern astronomical traditions, acknowledged resembled a cometary object. Quote, "The Inanna symbol sometimes looks like a comet," end of quote. At the same time, however, the Mush sign was also employed to denote the king's headband, much like the Egyptian Seshed band. Witness the statement of Peter Steinkeller, quote, "As for its specific meaning, we undoubtedly find here a type of band. A translation diadem would thus not be inappropriate. It would seem, therefore, that the archaic symbol of Inanna depicts a scarf or headband." End of quote. In a Sumerian temple hymn from the 3rd millennium BCE, the mother goddess is described as tying a mush headband around a king. Witness the following passage. Quote, "The newborn king, she binds the mush around his head. The newborn lord, she sets the crown on his head. He is secure in her hand." End of quote. Egyptian tradition preserved a similar story about the goddess Isis. According to the Pyramid text, Isis tied a headband or fillet on Horus, the prospective king of the gods. Quote, "Isis the Great, who tied on the fillet in Chemis when she brought her loincloth and burnt incense before her son Horus the young child." End of quote. In the passage in question, the word for headband is MDH, interchangeable with Seshed. The most common ideogram or determinative for MDH is depicted here. The resemblance between this ideogram and the Sumerian Mush sign employed to denote Inanna Venus is evident at once. The fact that both ideograms were used to describe the king's headband or crown confirms their fundamental affinity and suggests that their spiraling volute-like form traces to a celestial prototype. What are we to make of this evidence? To paraphrase a famous taunt from inner-city basketball, the pictographs don't lie. And in the final analysis, it is the detailed parallels between the Egyptian eye goddess and the Sumerian Venus goddess that make the case for planetary catastrophism and signal the need for a wholesale revolution in our understanding of the recent history of the solar system, likely within the last 10,000 years.